Shalom! Hey, this is Dan, and I wanted to come to you again tonight, make another video about a Torah portion. I know I'm a little bit behind, so we're going to talk tonight about the time when Joseph becomes second in command. Now before we do that though, I want to share a couple things with you. First of all, when we left last time, we had Joseph in prison still. Now, Joseph got framed, basically. He was put in prison for a crime he never committed. It was said that he slept with Potiphar's wife, or at least made an advancement on her. That's the story that Potiphar's wife told, but we know that that's not really how the story went down. She made an advance on him, and in his attempt to run away, she grabbed his clothes, and he was out the door without his shirt or tunic or something. And so she used that to say, well, look, your servant, Potiphar, your servant came and he made moves on me. Well, that got him put in prison. Now, as he's in prison, God still gives him favor because he becomes the guy that even the prison guards trust the most. And he's like the warden within the jail, so to say. He has control over some of the other people in there. He has a little bit more freedom than some of the other people in there. Now, while he's there, he runs into the baker and the chief cupbearer, and we know that they had dreams that distressed them. Joseph interpreted their dreams for them. For the baker, it was not good news. He ended up getting his head cut off. But for the cupbearer, he got restored back to his position. Now, here we are, they approximated 2 years later, and Pharaoh himself has a dream and isn't sure who to call on or isn't sure what it means. So he calls on his chief magicians. Now, when I was doing some study on this just now, I realized that back then, the magicians weren't the pulling a bunny out of a hat type thing. These were people who were heavily involved in the occult. Now, the reason I point that out is because this is how cool God really is. The magicians couldn't understand exactly what Pharaoh's dream meant. As a result, we find out later on that Joseph did. But God blocked the chief magicians from even knowing what the dream meant so that Joseph could be restored. If the magicians had been able to figure out what this dream was all about, then there would be no need for Joseph to come out of prison to get restored, save the Israelites, all hunky-dory. But God made it to where the magicians, the occult people, didn't even realize what this dream was about. So, the cupbearer, he remembers, oh, wait a minute, I had a dream when I was in prison, and this guy, he helped me out. So they grab Joseph, and they bring him. They shave him, they dress him, they make him look clean, bring him before Pharaoh, and Pharaoh shares his dream. Well, I had this dream, I had two dreams. First one, there was these good-looking cows, and they got swallowed up by these ugly, weakly-looking cows. And then the second dream was, I have these stalks of grain, these healthy, plump stalks of grain, and then they got eaten by the ones that were withered. What exactly does that mean? And Joseph shared with Potiphar, in the most humblest of ways, I'm sure. And he said, Pharaoh, these two dreams are one and the same. They both mean the same thing. You are going to have 7 good years of abundance, followed by 7 years of famine. Now, the magicians couldn't figure this out. Again, this is what I think is so cool, that God blocked the intellect of the magicians to where they couldn't figure this out. But because Joseph did, he was given second in command, the responsibilities of second in command. And again, as I was reading through some of this, I found exactly what all of this entails. And I'm going to read it to you a little bit here. I kind of typed some notes out for myself here. It says that, excuse me, only Pharaoh had more weight than Joseph, as far as whose rule was more important. But it says here that Joseph gained quite a bit. He got the signet ring, he was clothed in fine linen, he was given a golden necklace, and he got to ride in Pharaoh's own personal chariot. In addition to that, he got a wife, and later on, when time came, he had 2 sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, who we know make up the last of the 10 tribes of Israel. So look at all the stuff that Joseph gained from following God. from allowing God to take him from this pit and restore him into a position of prominence. He got the authority. Only Pharaoh was higher than him. He got the respect of the people. He got out of prison. He got a wife, and he ended up getting 2 of the sons that were given into the 12 tribes of Israel. Now, if that's not God's promotion, I don't know what is. But the story goes on. This Torah portion continues, and it goes on and talks about how the brothers, back from the land of Israel, again, the famine came. You know, they had 7 years to build up their stocks, and Joseph was put in charge of that, where they would take some of the food and they would put it into the bins. And they had a storehouse that they would put the stuff in. So here we are 7+ years later, and the land of Israel, back where Jacob and the other sons are, starting to grow a little weak as far as the crops and such. So Jacob tells his boys, why don't you go down to Egypt? I heard they got some stuff out there. Take some money, go buy us some products, and bring it back here. Well, they do. They go down. 10 of them do. All except for Benjamin. So you got the other 10 brothers. And they go down, and Joseph recognizes them. But they don't recognize him because now, you know, it's been years since they saw each other. They say that it was probably about when Joseph was 17 years old that he was given into the slavery from his brothers. And so now here we are, years later, and Joseph recognizes his brothers, but his brothers don't recognize him. So he's able to use this to his advantage. And he calls them out and says, these men are spies from the land of Israel. Well, or from the land of Canaan, I'm sorry. And so what they do is they grab them, they question them. And Joseph asks, how many are there of you? And they said, well, there were 12. There's one little guy at home. One of them is gone. And so now, you know, there's just 10 of us here, but we got one more guy at home. And Joseph begins to ask more questions, and pinpointed questions. And he ends up calling them out as spies, puts them all in prison, gives it a little bit of time there, and then says, okay, here's the deal. In order for you to prove that you're not spies, I'm going to keep one of you, send the rest of you home. You bring back this 11th brother, and then we'll call it even. Well, Simeon stays behind. Simeon's put in prison. And so the other 9, they go home, and they're trying to convince their dad. Dad, hey look, we brought the products back. We brought everything back, except we kind of left Simeon back there. And the only way that we can get Simeon back is if you let us take Benjamin back there, back to Egypt. Well, Dad didn't like that idea, and here's why. Because not only did he already lose Joseph, and not only was he now losing Simeon, but he was so scared of what was going to happen to Benjamin that there was no way he was going to let this happen. He wasn't going to let the brothers take him. So time goes by, they run out of products. Simeon's still in jail. Reuben says to his dad, Dad, we're running out of stuff. You got to let us go back there. But we got to take Benjamin with us. No, that's not going to work. Well, Judah comes up and he asks the same question. Dad, you got to let us go get some more food. We got to take Benjamin with us. We got to get some more food, and here's the deal. You can take my life, my sons, if I don't come back with Benjamin. You know, it came to where there was a rock and a hard place. Jacob had to make a choice. And again, it's one of those things where we see that if Jacob had not made the right choice, if he had stayed stubborn in the fact that he was not going to lose another son, then there is no way to really assume that the land of Israel or that the people of Israel would still be around. This is one of those cases where, again, we see that the enemy did not like God's people from the start. And so he's going to do everything he can to take them out. And in this case, he brought famine, and he also maybe brought a little bit of stubbornness in there. Now, I can relate to Jacob. I can understand how he didn't want his son to go, or any of his family to go, because they might not come back. But there still comes a point where, well, for instance, I was watching Star Trek this weekend. I had the Star Trek marathon on, and at the end of the second movie, Spock makes an announcement that says that he would give up his life, and I don't remember the words exactly, but he says that the needs of the many, no, the needs of the, it don't matter. Anyway, go watch the movie. But what he says basically is, I'm going to lay down my life for the greater need, and the greater need right now is that the ship needs to get out of this area because there's about to be an explosion. So Spock lays down his life. It's almost kind of the same thing here. Jacob came to a point finally where he realized that his stubbornness was not going to save the family. It wasn't going to bring them any food. So what he does is he says, okay, take him. Take him. Take Benjamin, take your other brothers, go down and prove to this guy in Egypt that you are who you say you are, that you're not spies, that you are a band of brothers. And come back with Simeon, with Benjamin, and with some more food. And that's kind of where we leave this Torah portion. Now, I made a few notes, and the only other point that I want to make in this brief part here is that we see a change in the brothers. Now, at the beginning, when we had Joseph on the scene, again, right when he was approximately 17 years old or so, we saw that these brothers could care less, really. They were a bunch of half-brothers that they didn't like Joseph. They didn't like any kind of favoritism their dad was showing to Joseph. And now here we are later on, maybe feeling a little bit guilty for the crime that they had committed against Joseph, to where they were willing to risk their life for Benjamin. They were willing to lay down, like Judah did, and like Reuben said, they were willing to lay down their own family, their own selves, as a way of saying, we will protect Benjamin. That's a far cry from what they did with Joseph. But, as we'll see in the next clip, it was that heart change that Joseph was looking for. He wanted to see if his brothers had changed. He wanted to see if his brothers would protect Benjamin. I'm not going to give the story away. You can read ahead, but come back again next time, and we'll look and see what happens in this next segment. I'm Dan. Shalom. Have a great night.